Hey, I was playing some Game Boy games and I came across this Simpsons game called Bart and the Beanstalk. It's a really stupid concept, but let's take a quick look. On the first stage, you progress upward through the beanstalk while collecting coins. Doing this is incredibly hard though because of the terrible controls. There's bugs that are crawling along the ground and you can kill them with 2 shots from your slingshot, but it's easier said than done. You'll fire your first shot, but the slingshot fires so slow that by the time you get off the second shot, the beetle will have already hurt you and you lose energy. This happens continually throughout the board, which makes it difficult to progress. Why does the slingshot have to be so delayed? And the shots that you fire don't go far enough. It goes like 1 foot and then it disappears. Imagine if you threw a tennis ball at somebody, but as soon as it left your hand, it disappeared into a black hole. Or maybe it's like the transporter gun on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where the bullets get transported to a faraway land. Yeah, that's it. Bart shoots the slingshot and the projectile ends up killing the Joker in Batman on NES. At first I thought this game would be unoriginal with the whole beanstalk theme, but now that I've seen that they've introduced transporter slingshots, I'm impressed. And sometimes you'll fire the first shot at the beetle and hit it, but then it moves off screen. You expect it to come back again so you can land your second hit and kill it, but it never comes back. So naturally I assumed it was dead or just gone because it went off the screen. So I keep walking and it's back, so I had no choice but to get hit. The next thing that's too hard is trying to jump between the vines. It's easy to slip off for one thing, and it can even be difficult to just climb down. If you're standing too far to the left or too far to the right, you can't make Bart climb down. As you can imagine, the accuracy isn't too hot because it's a Game Boy game, so it's frustrating. Then, when you're actually on the vine, and you want to jump to the next one, you'd think you could just press left and he'd hop straight over to the next vine, but instead he jumps upward like a normal jump. So if there's anything above you, you'll get hurt. So the only way to do this is to get to the very bottom of the vine before you try and jump, but guess what happens then? You slip off because you're too low. Ugh. Once you finally get up top, it tells you that it's required to get all 40 of the coins to progress. Now if you look, I almost have enough, and I only need a few more, so I went back to collect the few remaining coins, and I got the final coin, and now I'm ready to go to the next area. But first I have to get back up top and get off of this vine. I can't go up because the bugs are blocking the way, so I had to make a leap of faith, and of course I picked the wrong side, sending me to my doom. I did eventually make it to the boss after playing through the first stage about 1,000,000 times. It's a bee that sort of looks like Homer. His pattern is very easy, and it's total contrast to the rest of the stage. On the next level, you're outside the castle, and you have to hop on clouds. I messed up, and I died, and then I found out that there's no continues, so I would have had to do the entire first stage all over again, and there is just no way I was going to go through that again. This has to be one of the hardest first stages in any game, and ranks right up there with the first stage in Back to the Future Part 3 on the Genesis. And speaking of Genesis, does anybody remember Bart's Nightmare? Well, I think that they got the title switched around. Because this, the first stage of Bart and the Beanstalk, that is Bart's Nightmare. Then there was Bart Simpson's Escape from Camp Deadly. The game consists of different tasks that you're supposed to perform at the camp. The first thing is to collect all the flags. Lisa gives you a boomerang, but they're limited, so you need to be careful how you use them. The first boss, you have to use the boomerang and hit him in the back of the head, but there's no way that you'd guess that unless you read it somewhere. After that, they give you a beekeeping outfit to protect from the killer bee attacks, but you only keep it for a limited time. So it runs out before you can even make it to the bees, making it useless. The next section is the lunch break, where you have to walk through the mess hall throwing forks, knives, and food at the counselors. There's not much to say here. Then I got to the second section where you have to capture more flags. But then come the wasps. You have to use the boomerang to kill the wasps, but you have to jump up in the air to hit them. When you jump up in the air though, the boomerang flies at a diagonal angle instead of straight. If Bart would just shoot the boomerang straight, this would be no problem, but you'll get killed due to the crappy controls. The boomerang just goes wherever the hell it wants, flying in completely unintended directions, missing all the enemies. It'll leave you frustrated, and it'll leave Bart dead. There was also Bart vs. the Juggernauts. This one has Bart on a TV show, similar to American Gladiators, competing in different events to earn money. There's an electroshock, basketball grid, jousting, skateboarding, and even a maze with Apu in the Quickie Mart. One thing I can say is during the skateboarding part, if you keep pausing, you'll be able to tell what's coming ahead of you easier so that you don't crash. It's a little bit like that trick fighting the Yellow Devil, or the Cyclops, or whatever you call him in Mega Man 1. Just keep pausing over and over. The graphics and music are okay for a Game Boy game, and I have to give it credit for actually including some more Simpsons characters like Barney, Kent Brockman, and Dr. Marvin Monroe. It's okay, I guess, but if you're not a fan of sports games, you're probably not going to like this one much. And then there was Night of the Treehouse Horror on Game Boy Color. Now before I go on, you might be wondering how I'm recording all these handheld games. For the regular Game Boy games, I just used the Super Game Boy, and for games like Night of the Treehouse, which was a Game Boy Color game, I used the Game Boy Player, which was an attachment that goes on the bottom of the GameCube. I ran into a problem though, the game doesn't seem to load. I tried some other games that I own, and they all work fine, so I know the system is okay, so I figure the battery inside the game must be dead. I would just open it up real quick and replace the battery, but here's the problem. The screw on the back of the Game Boy Color games requires a very special screwdriver that I don't have. But I have a solution. Now this next part I definitely do not recommend doing at home. I read that there's a trick that can be done to open a Game Boy Color without having that special tool. I took an ordinary Bic pen and I lit the end of it on fire until it started to melt. Then I quickly stuck the tip of the pen into the hole so that the plastic would melt around the screw, thus forming my own homemade tool. Then I let it sit and harden for a while and cool off. But here's the thing, when I eventually went back again to use my newly formed tool to open the game, it didn't work. The plastic started to chip away and it just wouldn't unscrew the game. So don't even bother trying this, cause it doesn't even work. Well, I did everything I could to get this damn thing to work, and of course this was the one Simpsons game that I really wanted to play, too, because it was a horror-themed game. Later I found out that the battery actually only has to do with saving the game, so it looks like my copy of the game is broken. Now, I know what you're thinking, why not just use an emulator? Well, one of the reasons I even like to do these reviews is to relive the past, by playing the games the same way I did when they were released. Using an emulator would take the fun out of it for me. So, all in all, these Simpsons games are just not for me.
Eat my shorts.